So Black Tuesday on October 29th, 1929, during Hoover's administration, Black Tuesday happens. And this is just ugly. We had a Black Thursday the week before on October 24th. The stock market had gone blip, and now Black Tuesday happens and the stock market just bottoms out. So many people had overinvested in the stock market, and they were investing on margin, where they invested with credit, that the creditors started calling in the loans, and people couldn't pay, so they just started selling off short, and knowing they were going to take a loss, and panic absolutely sets in the stock market. It's really ugly. The stock market takes a $40 billion hit in one day. Unbelievable. This is the longest depression in our history. This is going to kick off the Great Depression. Now, today, we're sort of coming out of a struggling economy. This is not called a depression. This is simply a recession. It's all in how you term it. But this was the longest depression in our history. 4 million people were unemployed within 1 year of Black Tuesday happening. That number would increase by threefold, so times 3, in 2 years. So you're talking about tons of people, 12 million people who were unemployed in this country, and we didn't have that many people in this country at that time. 5,000 banks would collapse, and what happens when a bank collapses is that if you have money invested in it, it's not insured at that time. The FDIC didn't exist. So when a bank closed its doors, you lost your money. So there was a run on the banks. When people started noticing that all these banks were closing, there was a run on the banks where people literally ran to the banks and tried to take out all their money. Well, today, if we were to all go to our banks and try and take out our money, we would do the same thing to the economy. It would collapse, because banks don't keep that kind of money on hand. They use the money that we deposit in the banks as loans for other people to buy homes and cars and businesses and whatever. So 5,000 banks collapse, everybody runs to the banks to try and take out their money. It's ugly, okay? The causes of the Great Depression. Well, there's one big one. It's overspeculation. There's a big surprise. Who's overspeculating? Well, we overspeculated in farming. We talked about that already. We overspeculate in factories because we built too much and we were making durable goods instead of, well, non-durable goods, things that people need all the time. We were making things, we were overproducing vacuums and washing machines and refrigerators and cars, and people only needed one of those things. Credit, we overextended ourselves, we overspeculated in credit. Banks gave out too many loans that couldn't possibly be paid, and of course we overspeculated in the stock market. We know that on margin. Europe is still suffering from World War I. Things are not good there, so that gets very ugly. There's a drought in the Mississippi Valley that dries up the farming field. Remember that this was kind of tenuous farming anyway, because you had to irrigate the land. Well, when there's a drought in the Mississippi, you don't have nothing to irrigate your land with. So it creates this dust bowl effect where things are so dry, the slightest wind creates this dust storm that blows up in the Midwest. And it really got quite ugly for farmers and everything. And people left. This is the whole story of Grapes of Wrath. People left the Mississippi Valley, Oklahoma and so forth, the Okies, to head out to California and make a better life because things had to be better. Hoover he called himself a rugged individualist, and he believed that everybody in America should be a rugged individualist. In other words, we shouldn't need the government's help to recover from an economic disaster. We should just plunge through it, and we would be fine. It doesn't work that way. So he thinks that if he gives some money he's finally pushed to the breaking point, and he says, okay, fine, we'll give some money to certain corporations, certain insurance agencies, or insurance companies, certain banks, certain states and federal government programs. We'll give money to certain corporations, and we're hoping for a trickle-down effect. In other words, if we give money to these overarching institutions, they will create jobs, create projects, and hire the people who truly need the help, who are among the poor in society. Great. So he gives $2.25 billion for public works, and that's done through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. That basically becomes a loan agency to these different groups to give them money to pursue these projects and hire people. Okay? Norris LaGuardia Anti-Injunction Act is also passed. Now, this is a very anti-labor union act. It basically says that federal courts, district courts, cannot pass injunctions or issue injunctions against companies for striking employers or protests or marches or anything like that. That workers should work. And so it's very anti-labor. And workers really felt like they were at the mercy of their employers. The Bonus Army, this is a group of veterans from World War I who had been promised by the government a bonus for fighting in the war. They had never really been paid their full salaries that they were supposed to get, so they were told they would get a bonus. And in 1924, there was a bill passed in Congress that said, you'll get your bonuses in 1945. Now, most of these guys were about 20 years old when they went off to war. So in 1924, they're only about 25 years old. And if they get their bonuses 20 years later, they're only going to be about 45 years old. You know, most people would live to see that age at that point. Things would be great. Well, the Bonus Army is about 20,000 people strong, and they march on Washington, and they call themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force, a takeoff on the American Expeditionary Force that fought in World War I, so they're the BEF. 20,000 people strong march on Washington, D.C. to demand their bonuses, not in 1945, but they want them now. They want them in 1930 to be paid to them in full. They don't want to wait another 15 years. We need the money now. So this is the summer of 1932, and Hoover says, forget it. You're not getting your bonuses. It's not happening. You'll get them when they were promised. And he sends in General Douglas MacArthur. Now, Hoover had told the BEF, he said, we will pay for you guys to get back home wherever you live. We'll cover your costs, but you got to go. Only about 6,000 people left Washington. The others, 14,000, stay. So Hoover tells General Douglas MacArthur, I'm sure you heard his name last year, he tells MacArthur, he says, get rid of them. They're loitering in Washington. They need to go. What they had done is set up a giant Hooverville, where they set up this like shanty town in Washington, D.C., and right on the mall of the Smithsonian area. And he tells MacArthur, he says, get rid of them. I don't care what you have to do. And MacArthur uses some pretty harsh tactics to get rid of the BEF. He wasn't going to put up with any crap. So he never was known for putting up with a lot of crap. Japan is going to, internationally now, we're switching gears, internationally, Japan invades Manchuria. Now, Manchuria is a northern province in China. And when Japan invades Manchuria, the open door policy is kaput. It's done. They violate the whole thing. It's finished. Okay, no more open door. This is a direct violation of the League of Nations Covenant, which Japan was a member of. It's a direct violation of the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which Japan had signed. So this is an ugly move by Japan. It's a very aggressive move in foreign policy by Japan. This happens in 1931. The League of Nations meets in Geneva, Switzerland, the capital of neutrality. They invite the United States to sit in on the meeting. We didn't have any voting powers because we weren't a member, but we sit in on the meeting. And the League of Nations basically says, that was very bad, Japan. You shouldn't have done that. And we're going to slap your wrist for it. And they slap their wrist, and that's it. Nothing else happens. Harry Stimson, who's the Secretary of State for the United States, basically says that the United States will not tolerate any country invading another. Okay, what you going to do about that? Japan at this point, in 1932, they're going to bomb Shanghai, China. They're really aggressive. And the League of Nations says, that was very bad, Japan. You shouldn't have done that. And Japan says, you know what? We're sick and tired of you playing Mother Goose. We're out of the League of Nations. We're done. We're pulling out. And they exit themselves from the League of Nations. Now, think about this. It's 1931, 32. Who might be sitting around in other countries watching Japan take over different territories and saying, they're able to do this, and nothing's happening to them? There was a little guy with a funny mustache in Germany sitting around paying very close attention to what was going on internationally. And when he sees that Japan basically does not get punished by the world for taking over territory, he gets it in his head, of course I'm talking about Hitler, he gets it in his head and he says, we should be able to do the same thing as Germany, and I'm going to make sure we're in a position to do it. Hoover also had to deal with Latin America, but his policy on Latin America is we're just going to be a good neighbor. We're not going to intervene in Latin America. We're not going to do anything too obvious. We're not going to, make our presence known in Latin America. We're just going to be a good neighbor. If they need something and they ask for it, we will provide it. Done.